So this is a story that I look at and I go to myself, okay, we better draw a bit of a defining line here, because I never would have thought you'd see a number like 1.75 million Canadians are affected by something that is referred to as hoarding disorder, which we used to just call hoarding. I didn't know it was a disorder,
Well, because
but
I think
apparently it is.
there's a mental health aspect to it, right?
Now, you may have seen these shows on TV, right? I think a couple of networks, or one of the networks has this, but it's mind-boggling. They open a door, and this person, you can barely even see anything in there because stuff is covering the entire
everywhere.
home.
And they're making a Canadian version of that, by the way. The doctor we're about to speak to is part of it. It's called Hoarders Canada. I find those shows really difficult to watch, actually. There's like a curiosity you want to see, but then it's so out of control, and you start to feel, I mean, kind of what they feel, I suppose, which is overwhelmed. And
it's pretty terrible to see, because you think, well, how could anyone let it get to that point? But there are people, obviously, who do this, and quite a few of them. So Dr. Murray Anderson, as you said, on the line right now. Dr. Anderson, thank you for your time today. I guess my first question to you would be, rather than getting into the specifics of, how many of these people and do they all have the same kind of problem, I will ask for a friend. What's the difference between hoarding and, say, collecting?
That's a really good question, and thanks for having me on. I think that, the quick answer here would be, I could be as simple and as plain as saying, my wife always jokes, why don't you send them down to the basement and show them your record collection, Murray? So, that's my collection, right? And some would say that, I may hoard albums and music. I was a DJ in a prior life, and so there's an accumulation of items. But the one defining difference that we need to think about here is that, push came to shove, if there was a medical emergency in my family or something like that, I would be able to get rid of those albums, sell them, donate them. And while I'd have a difficult time getting rid of them, I'd be okay. For someone that has a hoarding disorder, which is a standalone mental illness, just like any other one, as of the DSM-5 in 2013, it's almost excruciating to remove those items from their house. They may have a little insight in terms of, what those items mean and the problems that they're causing. And then third, it's that they would try to reclutter their space in probably less than 60% of the time it took them to get there in the first place.
Well, okay, Can I ask how, in terms of getting there in the first place, does it go from I'm just going to collect a couple of things and then just never stop? Or how does it
gradual?
How does it develop?
Is there a gradual thing?
Yeah, there's a 3-hour PowerPoint here that I won't, with anyone to watch. But the existing studies, and so sort of my focus is that, I've probably been into a few hundred homes to assess along with the fire department. I provide treatment as well. But what normally happens is there's no one thing that leads up to that. And for some people, it is a slow increase. It could be as doctors, lawyers, dentists. It really doesn't meet any one category. And that person could retire and, they could maybe break a hip and fall down. So they'll have items coming in and not much going out. So that would be the first thing. But what they're finding is that the existing research is showing that hoarding tendencies take or show their place as early as in the age 9 to 12, somewhere around there. So it definitely has a start, and it only picks up speed from then.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I'd like to know a little bit more about that, because it's something my daughter has an incredibly difficult time letting go of anything, to the point where we're like, well, what are you trying to replace? And that's something I've wondered about with hoarders. Like, is there a void that they're trying to fill? Has something happened where they're trying to use the stuff to make up for whatever else is lacking or what has happened to them?
Yeah, well, that's also another excellent question. And for some people, it's as simple as having an over-attachment to items.
Okay.
And the sentimental value that we see in kids is legit. I'm always very careful about separating the individual from the language that we use to describe the disorder, because sometimes it's very difficult to disseminate who is and who isn't, right? So, but with some of these people, it is... you can see them as soon as you go in. And for some of these people, they will never present to any helping party, like friends or family. They'll keep people out. But what will happen is that a pipe may burst, or something that will happen for a party will have to come in and assess it. And that's when they'll see is that this activity is years in the making. And it could be based on trauma. It could be based on sexual abuse. It could be based on, a drug habit, or it could be a pre-existing condition that's been passed down from a previous generation in the family.
Oh, interesting.
But then I guess the logical, continuation of that is, let's say this is something that you develop, and it is an issue, right? It's a mental issue here. How do you get around it? When do you begin? Can you even begin to change things? I mean, do you have to go whole hog, as it were?
You guys are asking the really good questions here. And so in my time working as a psychologist on the front lines is that I became painfully aware of how little is offered to these individuals and how little in terms of health authorities and institutions pay heed and also, pay for services. So the one thing that I've started to do is always base on their relationship. That's the first and foremost thing, is to reduce the stigma and trauma, because I'm sure you can see, how stigmatized some of these people may feel when it's just unknown, or it's just not talked about that much different than, say, schizophrenia or depression or anxiety. And schizophrenia is 1% of the population. What we're seeing here is it's 6%, and I would even suggest that's low. I would say it's double that, about 12%. So in reaching out, you're going to have health authorities that are going to be able to offer it. There are some resources in Montreal. There's a support group called amiquebec.org that you can access. And the other thing, too, is that, it's a bit of a different thing, but the Hoarders Canada show will take people on if they're interested in getting treatment. And if they're looking to it, I absolutely can say it's an ethical support system for some people. They can look at hoarderscanadacasting.com, and they can do sort of a screening interview if they think they may be legit looking for help.
I'm curious, Dr. Anderson, you said you've been into about 100 homes. Did the pandemic, we were isolated, we were ordering things online like never before. Did the pandemic exacerbate the situation for people who were perhaps already predisposed to hoarding?
Yeah, I would say absolutely so. And it's, maybe that person doesn't have a hoarding disorder. With the right help, they'll be able to, get rid of some of those items. But when people are sticking to their homes and they're looking for, happiness and looking for things to brighten their day, they're going to shop, right? So, just ask my wife. We'll have parcels coming in, and, it's great. But when we look at the diagnosis, you have to be very careful about who has a clutter situation as opposed to the disorder. And that's when the professionals need to be called in and consulted with, for sure.
So, again, I'm going to go back to something I asked at the beginning with respect to how do you differentiate between someone who just collects a lot of stuff and turns it into a hoarder. Can you, so you talked about collecting albums, having been a DJ. So let's say we have, 100 albums. At that point, I'm like, okay, I look at those sometimes and I say, well, I got a lot of these, but I'm not buying more. I'm perfectly fine. They're going to stay there forever. Then I have another collection of something else. At what point do you need to worry that you sort of lost that control and you just keep getting more stuff?
It's a really difficult point, and my answer would be that it depends. I don't know if you've heard of Gabor Mate, who's very well known in downtown east side of Vancouver, and he specializes in providing treatments for people that deal with trauma and addiction. And he's a huge music buff, so he collects. And so he's like, I'm being totally upfront about it. I collect music. It's not a problem, but I do have a lot of it.
Right.
So what I say is that when a space cannot be used for what it is built for, say a hallway, you can't get a stretcher down there, a bedroom, you're not sleeping in your bed, the kitchen, you can't use the elements, it's a fire hazard. That's the first sign that something is needing attention, and that's how you separate someone from who will collect items to someone that is definitely hoarding an item or items.
Good tip.
And then I'm curious, there's an element of shame involved to this. At least that's what I've seen. I haven't experienced this firsthand like you have, but I feel like there's a huge aspect of shame. Like you said, they can be living a completely normal life and we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. So does that mean that there's almost like, what I'm trying to understand is the shame, but also the awareness that you have this problem? Because in order to feel the shame, you have to know that there's a major problem, no?
Well, I think that's a really good point. The tricky thing here is that, hoarding disorder crosses all socioeconomic status. You have people who work in factories, people that work in restaurants, all the way up to doctors, lawyers, dentists, and the like. The few hundred homes I've been into or abodes, it's amazing to see the widespread of, the lived experience. So outside of the home, everything can be going extremely well and have a really vital social sort of experience. But inside the house, it's a completely different story.
Wow.
So very
fascinating.
quickly, the 10-second thing, how I would work with a diagnosis and being tentative and trying to, be as non-stigmatizing as I can is one, are they able to discard with items? Two, are they recluttering the apartment almost at the same time as they're decluttering the apartment? And three, how much insight do they have? Often they have great insight in their personal lives, but when it comes to their abode, very little insight.
So we have to go and wrap up. I will ask you, because this is fascinating,
It is.
to Natasha's question, as you just described now, can you talk to someone like that who clearly has a problem? You can tell it because we're being objective in looking at them, and suggest to them that, hey, by the way, just saying, without pointing a finger or being accusatory, and say, there's a lot of stuff around here. Maybe you don't need some. Like, I'm just wondering, without getting treatment, without seeking professional help, how does someone just on the outside who's concerned begin that conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always recommend talking to the person directly first, rather than going around to, dropping a concern off with the health authority, whatnot. Talking to the person, just trying to sit down and just trying to connect with them, just like anyone else with a mental health issue, trying to connect and try to make some sort of middle ground, and that should always be the first step. That will destigmatize the entire process for sure.
This is fascinating.
Excellent.
So the Canadian show,
it's called, so if you are interested, hoarderscanadacasting.com, if you would like to be a part of the show, and if people are looking for help, you suggested mequebec.org.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a number you can call Hoarders. It's 1-800-858-6603 as well.
All right. Doctor, thank you so much for the time this afternoon.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here. Thank you.